Decision 2024 here on MSNBC, and we have NBC correspondents fanned out across the country and on the ground in the key battleground states. Joining us now, Rahema Ellis. She's live at a polling station in Erie, Pennsylvania. Joe Fryer is in a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Maggie Vespa, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Antonia Hilton at a polling location in Raleigh, North Carolina. And Blaine Alexander is in Marietta, Georgia. Rahema, we'll start with you. There's been a legal fight over ballots in Erie County, with both parties filing lawsuits against the County Board of Elections. What's going on? What's the latest?
Mika, before I get into that, I got to tell you this. We talk a lot of times about the impact of ads and what is influencing people. I've been hearing you guys talk about it all morning and, in fact, during the course of this election process. And a guy told us just a little while ago he had been watching a ton of ads. And guess what he decided? He decided yesterday who he's going to vote for. He's voting for Harris. A tremendous impact those ads have had on him. Another person told us that he voted, or who voted for Trump, said he decided months ago what he was going to do. In terms of that lawsuit now, you're right. There have been both the Democrats and the Republicans who jointly filed with a lawsuit against the County Board of Elections because there was complaints about people not getting their mail-in ballots. The court decided that the county had to make some provisions for them to rectify that, and they did. 4 extra days after early voting was ended, they allowed people to come to the county courthouse and cast their ballots. Now, here's the thing that's really important that you point out, that this county, Erie County, makes up only 2% of the total population of Pennsylvania, and yet, as you said, it has a large footprint in presidential elections because it has historically voted for the winner of the president's election in the last 4. And now these provisional ballots that people can file when they come to a polling place like this and around Erie County, if they did not get their mail-in ballot, they can present a provisional ballot. But those provisional ballots will not be counted until Friday. So that means we may not know the outcome of this election for a while now, because every single one of those ballots is important. You remember the last time we were here and it took them until Saturday before we actually knew who was the winner coming out of Pennsylvania.
That's right, waiting for Pennsylvania. All right, Rahema, let's swing from Pennsylvania to Wisconsin. That's where we find NBC's Joe Fryer, live from Waukesha County. Joe, what are you seeing there?
Hey there, Willie. We're in the village of Mukwonago, and you can see the polls opened just over half an hour ago here. Take a look at this line all the way around me. These are folks who have actually filled out their ballots. They're just waiting to put it in the machine so their votes are counted. Before the doors opened here at 7 a.m. local time, we saw at least 50, 60 people standing outside getting ready to vote. The line was wrapping around the building. People want to get that vote in before they get to work for the day. This is part of Waukesha County. That is part of what we call the WOW counties. That's Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington counties. These are the suburbs around Milwaukee. They have long been a GOP stronghold, but over the last decade, we've seen Democrats chipping away at that GOP advantage here. You can even look at the numbers. In 2016, Hillary Clinton, she got about 33% of the vote here. Fast forward 4 years later, President Biden getting nearly 39% of the vote. That's the highest Democrats have done in Waukesha County since Michael Dukakis. Democrats are hoping if they can push hard here, they can get Vice President Harris to 40%. That'd be the first time that happened here in this county since the early 1960s. Mika.
Wow. All right. Moving to Michigan now. For the first time, residents could cast their ballots in person during early voting. More than 3 million people have voted through polling sites, as well as mail-in and absentee ballots. That's about 45% of registered voters in Michigan. Maggie Vespa, how are the crowds looking in Grand Rapids, Michigan this morning?
Mika, we had a line out the door when polls opened around 7 Eastern. You can see we have a little bit of a lull at this polling place right now here in Grand Rapids, and that's in large part because, I mean, we're going to see that throughout the day. You're right, more than 1 million people, 1.2 million, took advantage of that first ever opportunity here in Michigan to vote early and in person. So we had that option. They had the mail-in ballots option. So total, we're talking well over 3 million people. 45% of registered voters in Michigan have already cast their ballots before today even started. Now, as far as issues go here among among Michigan voters. Obviously, the state is home to America's auto industry, so inflation's a key issue, but we also see preserving democracy and abortion as top issues on the minds of Michigan voters. Obviously, those issues have been hammered home by Vice President Harris and former President Trump, both campaigns making more than a dozen stops, including last night, in this key battleground state. A number of polls show Vice President Harris has a narrow lead here in Michigan, but multiple polls show that lead is as little as 1 point. So we're talking a dead heat in this key battleground state as well. Both sides trying to get those 15 electoral votes. As far as timing, I know it's a key question everywhere. Last time around in 2020, we got this state called for President Biden around 6 p.m. the day after Election Day. But another first here in Michigan, clerks across the state were, for the first time ever, allowed to start pre-processing those mail-in ballots as early as 8 days ago. So they're hoping that speeds things up. And the Secretary of State said we could see results by midday tomorrow. Willie?
All right, should make a big difference. Maggie, thanks so much. Let's swing down to North Carolina. State Trump won in 2020. The Harris team has now put in play, though. Antonia, what more can you tell us about the race there?
Yeah, Democrats here this morning, they are really confident. They tell me that they think this is the closest dynamic and sort of level of energy that they've seen since 2008. That's, of course, when Barack Obama was the last Democrat to win North Carolina. And they think that things are different this time around for a few reasons. The first is, of course, abortion and the fact that they've been able to reach women across the aisle or unaffiliated voters, of which there are many in this state, who are really passionate about women's reproductive rights. Then the historic black communities here and the ability to get them to turn out. The beginning of the early voting period, Republicans were really strong. But in the last several days, we started to see the black community come out at those high levels and also the youth vote. That's the last piece here. All these young Gen Zers in these college towns in North Carolina, the Democratic Party has made a huge investment in them. And they started to see that come out in those last few days of early voting, too. And so there's an immense amount of excitement here and focus. And even that Iowa poll, frankly, you might think, well, what does Iowa have to do with anything going on in North Carolina? But there are parts of the electorate there that look very similar to parts of rural North Carolina, too. And they're thinking if she can overperform with people in Iowa, she probably is here, too. And that's our recipe for success. This is also going to be an interesting state, guys, because we're probably going to be able to find out the results a little bit sooner. Polls are going to close at 7:30. And this is a state where we might know by 10:30, 11 p.m., Mika.
All right, now to Georgia, where more than 4 million early voters have already cast a ballot. Blaine, what's going on there?
Well, Mika, you said it. This is already a record-breaking election here in the state of Georgia. That number that you just said is more than half of Georgia's registered voters. They've already cast their ballot. Now, Georgia officials today are expecting another million or so voters to come out and cast their ballots in person. I'm standing here at one polling place in Marietta. We're just outside of Atlanta. We've seen a steady stream of voters coming in all day. One person just told me it only took about 5 minutes to go in and out and cast that ballot. Now, of course, when you talk about places here in Georgia, Cobb County is really one of the places that both campaigns are looking at closely. This is just outside of Atlanta. It's in metro Atlanta, but this is that highly coveted suburban vote. We saw both campaigns really making a strong play for voters here in the closing days of this campaign. But already we're seeing at least one lawsuit that's kind of major here, and it has to do with absentee ballots. Now, Cobb County was delayed in sending out about 3,400 or so absentee ballots. And so a lower court here in Georgia had ruled that because people received them late, they could return them late. They could have 3 extra days, turn in those absentee ballots on Friday. Well, Georgia Supreme Court came in and said, not so fast. They're going to pause that decision and rule that those ballots will not immediately be counted. So what must happen now is that if you have one of those late ballots, you either have to bring it in person or come vote in person, and those ballots will be set aside and still not determined whether or not they will ultimately be counted in this election, Mika.
All right, NBC's Blaine Alexander live in Georgia, Antonia Hilton in North Carolina, Maggie Vespa in Michigan, Joe Fryer in Wisconsin, and Rahema Ellis reporting from Pennsylvania. Thank you all very much for your reporting. And